Why the silence? You are staring at your phone. You have checked it more times today than you care to admit. You have rehearsed what you will say when they finally reach out. You have imagined seeing their name light up the screen. And yet nothing. Only silence. Only the growing ache of absence. And beneath that ache, a whisper begins to form. Quiet at first, but growing louder with each passing hour. They do not care. They have moved on. They have forgotten you. You have been replaced. The silence confirms it. The absence proves it. And so you spiral deeper into the story, and the story hardens into fact, and the fact becomes your experience, and the experience seems to validate the story, round and round, tighter and tighter, until you are convinced that the silence is coming from them. But I tell you now with absolute certainty, the silence is not coming from them. It is coming from you, and more precisely, it is coming from the unseen conversations you are having within yourself about them. The story you tell yourself, in the privacy of your own mind, about who they are, what they feel, and why they are not responding. That story is the true cause of the silence you experience. Not their will, not their choice, not their indifference or their new love or their busy schedule, your inner speech, your assumption, your imaginative activity about them. This is what creates the outer silence or the outer reach. The world is yourself pushed out. And if you are experiencing silence, it is because somewhere within you, you are speaking silence into being. This is not a metaphor. This is not positive thinking or hopeful wishing. This is the mechanical and inevitable operation of consciousness itself. Consciousness is the only reality. What you are conscious of being, you become. What you assume to be true of another, they must express in your world. Not because you control them, but because they, as they appear in your experience, are a reflection of your own inner state. They are you, pushed out. And if the you that is being pushed out is full of doubt, fear, longing, and the assumption of rejection, then the world must mirror that back to you in the form of silence, distance, and absence. So the real reason your specific person is not responding has nothing to do with what they ate for breakfast, who they are spending time with, whether they saw your message, or what mood they happen to be in. The real reason is the state you are occupying in relation to them. The real reason is the conversation you are having about them when you think no one is listening. But someone is always listening. Consciousness is always listening. Consciousness is always listening. And consciousness is always faithfully reproducing in your outer world the inner conversations you are most persistently having. This episode is about ending that inner conversation of silence and beginning a new one. It is about understanding that you are not a victim of their silence. You are the author of it. And as the author, you have the power to revise the story, to change the inner speech, and to experience a completely different outer result. Not because you manipulated them, but because you changed what you are inwardly conscious of being in relation to them. Welcome. If this is your first time here, I am honored to walk with you today through the teachings of Neville Goddard, one of the most profound spiritual teachers of the last century. If you have been here before, welcome back. This channel exists for one purpose only, to help you understand and apply the law of consciousness, the truth that your imagination creates reality, and that you are not at the mercy of the world, but the very power by which the world is shaped. Today's episode is for anyone who has waited for a text, a call, a message, a sign from someone they love, and felt the crushing weight of silence in return. I am going to show you exactly why that silence exists, what is truly generating it, and how to dissolve it entirely, not by chasing or convincing or strategizing, but by changing a single thing, your inner conversation. We are going to go deep today. We are going to move from the immediate ache of wanting them to respond to the vast spiritual truth of who you really are and what you are actually doing when you imagine. By the end of this episode, you will no longer see their silence as evidence of anything except your own prior assumption. And you will know exactly what to do tonight as you close your eyes to begin hearing from them in the way you truly desire. Let us begin. The story you keep telling yourself about them is not neutral. It is not passive observation. It is not simply noticing what is happening. Every time you say to yourself, "They are ignoring me. They do not care. They have moved on. They are with someone else. They are angry. They are done." Every single time you repeat that inner statement, you are not describing reality. You are constructing it. You are not reporting the news, you are writing it. And consciousness, being the only reality, takes that inner speech as an instruction, as a command, and begins to harden it into fact. This is what Neville meant when he said that inner talking is the beginning of all action. You think the action begins when they pick up their phone and type a message to you. But the true action began long before that, in the silent, invisible realm of your own mind, where you first assumed they would not respond. You imagined them distant. You felt the feeling of being ignored. You saw them in your mind's eye as cold, indifferent, preoccupied with others. And all of that imaginative activity, though unseen and unheard by anyone else, was the real creative act. Everything that follows in the outer world is simply the inevitable fruition of that inner action. The world you see is only ever the outpicturing of the world you have first imagined within. Most people think they are imagining in reaction to what is happening. They say, I imagine them ignoring me because they are ignoring me. I feel rejected because they have rejected me. I assume they do not care because they have shown me they do not care. But this is to misunderstand the entire order of creation. You are not imagining in response to facts. You are imagining first, and facts are arranging themselves in response to your imagination. What you call evidence is only ever the reflection of a prior assumption. You assumed it first, perhaps unconsciously, perhaps in a moment of fear or doubt, and then the evidence appeared to confirm it. But the evidence did not create the assumption. The assumption created the evidence. Let me make this utterly plain. If you are experiencing silence from your specific person, it is because you are first experiencing silence within yourself about them. Somewhere in your inner conversations, you are affirming their absence, their distance, their lack of interest. You may not be doing this deliberately. You may not even be aware you are doing it. But I assure you, you are doing it. Because consciousness is law. It does not make mistakes. It does not randomly assign experiences. What you experience outwardly is always, without exception, the perfect reflection of what you have assumed inwardly. If they are silent, you have assumed their silence. If they are distant, you have imagined their distance. If they seem cold, you have first felt coldness in your own imagination of them. Now you may protest. You may say, but I want them to reach out. I desire their message. I think about them constantly with love and longing. How can I be creating their silence when all I want is their presence? And here is where we must go deeper. Desire by itself does not create. Longing by itself does not manifest. In fact, longing often perpetuates the very absence it claims to want to end, because longing implies lack. When you long for their message, you are affirming that you do not have it. When you wait anxiously for their response, you are living in the state of waiting, which is a state of absence, not presence. And so consciousness, being faithful to your state, continues to give you the experience of waiting, of absence, of silence. Not because you do not want them, but because the very way you are wanting them is rooted in the assumption that you do not have them. This is the trap so many fall into. They focus all their attention on the person, on the desire, on the outcome, but they neglect entirely the state they are occupying while they focus. And it is the state that creates, not the focus. You can think about your specific person all day long, but if you are thinking about them from the state of separation, abandonment, or unworthiness, then separation, abandonment, or unworthiness, then separation, abandonment, and unworthiness is what you will continue to experience, no matter how much you claim to want the opposite. Neville was relentless on this point. He said again and again, it is not what you want that matters. It is what you are. You do not get what you want. You get what you are, and what you are is determined entirely by the state of consciousness you are occupying, which is revealed by your inner conversation is, why have they not texted me? What did I do wrong? They must not care. They are probably with someone else. Then you are occupying the state of rejection. And from the state of rejection you can only experience rejection. The outer world has no choice but to conform. So the first and most essential step in ending the silence is to become aware of your inner speech. Not to judge it, not to fight it, but simply to notice it. What are you saying to yourself about them when no one else is listening? What story are you rehearsing in the quiet moments? What assumptions are you casually making about their feelings, their intentions, their actions? Because those assumptions, those inner words, are the true cause of everything you are experiencing. And until you change them, nothing in the outer world can change. I once heard from a woman who had not spoken to her specific person in nearly 8 months. 8 months of silence. 8 months of no contact. And she had spent those 8 months in absolute torment, checking her phone, analyzing the past, imagining worst-case scenarios, and affirming over and over in her mind that he had forgotten her, that he had moved on, that she meant nothing to him any more. And of course, for 8 months, that is exactly what she experienced. Total silence. Not a word. Not a sign. And she took that silence as proof that her fears were true. Then she encountered Neville's teaching, and for the first time she understood that the silence was not coming from him. It was coming from her. It was the outward reflection of her inner conviction that he was gone. So she stopped trying to figure out why he was not responding. She stopped analyzing his behavior, his social media, his possible reasons. Instead, she turned her attention entirely inward. She began to watch her inner conversations, and she was shocked at how relentless they were. From morning until night, she was telling herself the story of his indifference, his absence, his new life without her. She had been living in that story so completely that it had become her reality. And so, she made a decision. She would no longer speak to herself in that way about him. She would no longer affirm his silence. Instead, she would imagine the opposite. She would assume that he thought of her constantly, that he adored her, that he was eager to be in contact with her. She did not wait for evidence. She did not wait to feel better. She simply began to change her inner conversation, gently but persistently. Every time the old story tried to creep back in, within 2 weeks, he reached out. A simple message at first, then a call, then a confession that he had been thinking about her the entire time but had felt unsure, confused, blocked by his own fears. But here is what matters. His reasons, his feelings, his confusion, none of that was the true cause of the silence. The true cause was her assumption of his absence, and the moment she changed that assumption, the outer world rearranged itself to match. He did not change because she convinced him. He changed because she convinced him. He changed because she changed what she was conscious of being in relation to him. This is the law. This is how it works. And it works whether you are aware of it or not. Your inner conversations are always creating. The question is only whether you are creating consciously or unconsciously. Most people are creating unconsciously, repeating the same fearful inner speech day after day, and then wondering why their experience never changes. But you do not have to live that way. You can become conscious of your inner talking. You can choose it deliberately. And the moment you do, everything begins to shift. Now let us go even deeper. Let us talk about what is really happening when you imagine, because this is not about tricking yourself into feeling better. This is not about pretending. This is about understanding the mechanics of reality itself. Neville taught that imagination is God, that your imagination is not a faculty you possess, but the very presence of God within you. When you imagine, you are not engaging in fantasy. You are engaging in fantasy. You are engaging in creation. You are selecting from infinite possible realities the one you will experience. And you are selecting it not by effort, not by force, but by assumption, by inner conviction, by the feeling of the wish fulfilled. When you imagine your specific person texting you, calling you, loving you, you are not hoping it will happen in the future. You are claiming it as true now, in the only place where truth can exist, in consciousness. And consciousness, being the only reality, must express that truth outwardly. Not because it is magic, but because it is law. What you are conscious of, you must experience. What you assume, you must encounter. The outer world is always, only, the shadow cast by the inner light of your own awareness. So when Neville says the world is yourself pushed out, he means it literally. Every person in your life is you pushed out. Your mother is you pushed out. Your employer 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 is you pushed out. And yeah, your Spetiktify cultivate. They are not acting independently of your consciousness. They are a part of your own imaginative activity made visible. And they cannot help but reflect back to you the assumptions you hold about them. If you assume they are indifferent, they will appear indifferent. If you assume they are indifferent, they will appear indifferent. If you assume they are in love with you, they will appear in love with you, not because you are controlling their mind, but because the version of them that exists in your world is a function of your consciousness, not theirs. They have their own consciousness, their own inner world, but you do not experience their consciousness. You experience your consciousness of them. And that is the only version of them that can ever appear in your reality. This is why trying to change them is useless. This is why chasing, convincing, explaining, or strategizing will never work. You are not dealing with an independent, external being who must be persuaded. You are dealing with your own concept of them, and your concept of them is entirely within your control. You do not have to wait for them to change. You do not have to wait for evidence. You simply have to change your inner conversation about them, and the outer person must shift to reflect that change. It is law. Let me give you another example. A man once came to Neville and said that his business partner had become hostile, uncooperative, and was threatening to dissolve their partnership. He was desperate to fix the situation, but every conversation with the partner only made things worse. Neville told him, stop trying to change him. Change yourself. Change your concept of him. The man did not understand at first, but Neville explained that the partner he was experiencing was only a reflection of his own inner state. He had been assuming betrayal, hostility, and conflict, and so that is exactly what he was experiencing. If he wanted a different partner, he needed to become a different version of himself in relation to that partner. So the man began to imagine his partner as cooperative, loyal, and supportive. He revised past conversations. He imagined future interactions filled with warmth and mutual respect. He did this persistently, not as a hopeful wish, but as an assumption of truth. And within days the partner's entire demeanor shifted. He became friendly, collaborative, and even apologized for his previous behavior. But nothing had changed externally. No conversation had taken place. No evidence had appeared to justify the shift. The shift happened in consciousness first, and the outer world simply rearranged itself to reflect it. This is what you must understand. Your specific person is not withholding contact because of their own reasons, their own feelings, their own feeling will. They are reflecting the state of consciousness you are holding about them. And if that state is one of distance, doubt, or rejection, then distance, doubt, and rejection is all you can experience, no matter how much you wish it were otherwise. But the moment you change that state, the moment you begin to assume contact, love, and intimacy, the outer person must change to reflect that new assumption. It is not optional. It is not hit or miss. It is law. So how do you change the state? How do you shift from the inner conversation of silence to the inner conversation of connection? This is the practical work. This is where the teaching becomes tangible, where you take the principle and apply it tonight, right now, in the privacy of your own wonderful human imagination. First, you must stop affirming the silence. You must stop saying to yourself, they are not texting me, they do not care, they have forgotten me. Every time you catch yourself in that inner conversation, stop. Do not argue with it. Do not try to convince yourself otherwise. Simply stop. Withdraw your attention from that story. Stop. Withdraw your attention from that story. It is a lie. It is not truth. It is only an assumption you have been repeating, and assumptions harden into facts only when you persist in them. So stop persisting in that one. Second, you must begin a new inner conversation. You must begin to speak to yourself about them in the way you would speak if the desire were already fulfilled. How would you think of them if they had just sent you a loving message? How would you feel about them if they were actively pursuing you, adoring you, choosing you? You would not be wondering why they are silent. You would not be questioning their feelings. You would simply know. You would take their love and attention for granted. You would assume it as naturally as you assume the sun will rise. That assumption, that inner knowing, that is the state you must occupy, not as a future, but as a present fact. And you occupy it by imagining, by constructing a scene in your mind that implies the wish fulfilled, and then living in that scene until it feels natural, until it feels real, until it becomes your dominant inner conversation. Let me walk you through this step by step. Tonight, when you are ready to sleep, you are going to enter into what Neville called the state akin to sleep. This is that drowsy, relaxed state just before you drift off, when the conscious mind begins to quiet and the subconscious becomes receptive. In this state, the imagination is most powerful. In this state, assumptions are most easily impressed upon consciousness. Neville called this state the workshop of creation. It is here that you do the real work. So as you lie in bed, relaxed and drowsy, you are going to imagine a simple, short scene that implies your specific person has reached out to you. Do not imagine the reach out itself. That is too general, too vague. Imagine the moment after. Imagine the feeling of having just received their message. See your phone in your hand. Feel the weight of it. See their name on the screen. Feel the surge of joy, relief, satisfaction. Hear yourself thinking, of course they've reached out. They always do. I am so loved. I am so adored. Make the scene sensory. Make it vivid. But keep it short. Neville always said, the scene sensory. Make it vivid. But keep it short. Neville always said, the scene should be brief, but it should have action. You might imagine yourself replying with ease and confidence. You might imagine telling a friend, yes, we have been talking constantly. Whatever scene you choose, it must imply that the contact has already happened, that the silence is over, that your assumption of their love and attention is now an experienced fact. Then loop that scene. Repeat it gently in your imagination over and over as you fall asleep. Do not force it. Do not strain. Simply return to the scene each time your mind wanders and live in it. Feel it until you drift off entirely. This is called living in the end. This is the technique Neville used to manifest everything in his own life, from his discharge from the army to his move to Barbados to his marriage to the woman he loved. He did not beg. He did not plead. He did not beg. He did not plead. He did not beg. He did not plead. He did not beg. He did not bathe. He simply imagined the end, lived in the feeling of the wish fulfilled, and let consciousness do the rest. And consciousness will do the rest for you too. You do not need to know how they will reach out. You do not need to figure out the bridge of incidents. You do not need to figure out the bridge of incidents. You do not need to monitor their social media, analyze their behavior, or interpret signs. All of that is interference. All of that is netterference. Your only job is to imagine and to persist in the assumption that it is done. Consciousness will handle the how. The outer world will rearrange itself in ways you cannot predict and need not control. Your job is only to remain faithful to the inner state. You may say, but I have imagined before and nothing happened. And I tell you, if you imagined and nothing happened, and I tell you, if you imagined and nothing happened, and I tell you, if you imagined and nothing happened, it is because you did not persist. You imagined once, twice, a few times, and then you returned to the old inner conversation. You checked your phone and saw no message, and you took that as evidence that your imagination did not work. And so you went back to affirming the silence, and the silence continued. But imagination only works when you persist in the assumption long enough for it to harden into fact. If you plant a seed and dig it up every day to see if it has sprouted, it will never grow. You must plant the seed, cover it, and leave it alone. You must assume the end and remain in that assumption, regardless of what the outer world is currently showing you. This is where most people fail. They want instant proof. They want immediate evidence. They want to imagine once and wake up to a text message. And sometimes that happens. Sometimes the assumption takes root so quickly that the outer world shifts overnight. But more often, there is a gap, a period where you are occupying the new state internally, but the old world is still visible externally. And this is the test. This is where your faith is proven. Will you remain faithful to the inner state, or will you remain to the old story the moment you see no evidence? Neville spoke often about the trial of your faith. He said that faith is not belief in things unseen. Faith is loyalty to your assumption in spite of what is seen. Faith is loyalty to your assumption in spite of what is seen. It is the decision to remain in the state of the wish fulfilled even when the world is still showing you the opposite. Because the world is always delayed. The outer is always a reflection of a prior inner state. What you are seeing today is the result of what you were assuming yesterday. This result of what you were assuming yesterday, last week, last month. And what you are assuming today will be what you see tomorrow, next week, next month. There is always a gap, and in that gap you must be still. You must be faithful. You must persist. This is not hard. This is not sacrifice. This is not effort. It is simply a decision to no longer feed the old story, to no longer give it your attention, your belief, your inner speech, and to give all of that instead to the new story, the true story, the story in which you are loved, adored, and in constant contact with the one you desire. And as you persist, something miraculous happens. The new story begins to feel natural. The assumption begins to feel like fact. You stop checking your phone with anxiety and start living as though the contact is inevitable. You stop wondering if they care and start knowing they do. And that knowing, that inner certainty, that is the feeling of the wish fulfilled. And the moment you feel it as true, the outer world must conform. Not because you earned it, not because you did enough, but because consciousness is law. Let us step back now and look at the bigger picture. Let us talk about why this matters, not just for your specific person, but for your entire experience of life. Because what we are really talking about here is not how to get a text message. What we are really talking about is the nature of reality itself, and your place within it. You are not a small separate being in a vast indifferent universe waiting for things to happen to you. You are consciousness itself. You are the operant power. You are the one through whom all things come into being. Neville said, "You are not a man seeking God. You are God seeking expression. And that expression happens through your imagination. What you imagine, you become. What you assume, you experience. What you are conscious of being, that is what you are. And this means that nothing, and I mean nothing, is outside of your control. Not because you are manipulating people, but because the people you experience are your own consciousness made visible. They are not acting on you. They are acting from you. They are your assumptions externalized. And so when you change your assumptions, they must change. Not because you have violated their free will, but because the version of them that exists in your world is a product of your imagination, not theirs. This is the great secret. This is what Neville spent his entire life trying to get people to see. You are not at the mercy of the world. The world is at the mercy of you. And the moment you truly understand that, the moment you accept the responsibility and the power of your own consciousness, everything changes. You stop being a victim. You stop pleading. You stop pleading. You become the creator you have always been, whether you knew it or not. And this applies to everything. To money, to health, to parole, to relationships, to every area of your life. The same principle that governs your specific person governs your bank account. The same law that can bring them back into your experience can bring anything you desire into your experience. Because it is not about them, it is not about the thing, it is about your consciousness. It is about the state you occupy, the assumption you persist in, the inner conversation you are having. Change that, and everything must change. So yes, we are talking today about your specific person, about why they are not responding, about the silence that has been tormenting you. But we are also talking about who you are, what you are capable of, and the infinite creative power that is yours by nature. And I want you to feel that power. I want you to know it, not as a concept, not as a hope, but as a lived reality, because it is yours. It has always been yours. And the moment you claim it, the world must bow to your assumption. You are not trying to make something happen. You are not trying to force, manipulate, or convince. You are simply becoming aware of what is already true in consciousness. You are imagining what you desire as though it were already so. And because consciousness is the only reality, it is already so. The outer world is simply catching up. I want to leave you now with a single practice, something you can do tonight, and every night until the assumption becomes natural, until the silence ends, until the outer world reflects what you have claimed within. This is not hard. This is not complicated. But it must be done. You must actually do it. Not just think about it. Not just understand it, but live it. Tonight, as you prepare for sleep, release every concern about your specific person. Release the need to know how or when or why. Release the old story entirely. And in its place, imagine the simple, undeniable fact of their love, their attention, their presence in your life. Imagine them thinking of you right now. Imagine them composing a message to you. Imagine them composing a message to you. Imagine them smiling at the thought of you. Do not imagine lack. Do not imagine waiting. Imagine contact. Imagine love. And as you imagine, let yourself feel it. Feel the warmth of being adored. Feel the joy of being chowed. Feel the joy of it. Feel the relief of knowing they are yours and you are theirs, not in the future, now. In consciousness where all things are already complete, then let that feeling carry you into sleep. Do not check your phone. Do not doubt. Do not revisit the old conversation. Simply rest in the assumption of the wish fulfilled. And when you wake, live from that assumption. Speak to yourself as though it is done. Think of them as though they are already in contact with you. Assume their love as easily as you assume the ground beneath your feet. And persist. No matter what the outer world shows you in the coming days, persist in the inner state, because the outer is always delayed, but the inner is instant, and the inner always becomes the outer. It is law. The real reason your specific person is not responding is not because they do not care. It is not because they are busy, confused, or seeing someone else. The real reason is the story you have been telling yourself about them. And now you know how to change that story. Not by convincing them, not by chasing them, but by revising your inner conversation, by occupying a new state, by imagining and persisting until the assumption becomes fact. You are not powerless. You are not at their mercy. You are the creator of your experience. And the moment you claim that power, the silence ends. Not because they finally decided to reach out, but because you finally decided to assume they would. And consciousness, being the only reality, made it so. So dare to assume it, dare to imagine it, dare to persist in it. And I promise you, the world will conform. Your specific person will reach out. And when they do, you will know it was not luck, it was not chance, it was not them finally coming around. It was you, it was your assumption, it was your imagination, it was your notion, it was your imagination, it was your assumption, it was your imagination, it was you. Not because the outer world has changed, but because you have. And that is all that ever needed to change. Sleep in that tonight, and wake to a new world.